Hey everyone. If you're looking for a story that makes you question how much of our past truly defines us, and whether true love can conquer old wounds, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments below where you're watching from, and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see who's joining us from around the world. The unexpected sanctuary. Madam, I told you, you cannot be here. The security guard's voice rose, pointing towards the street. This is a private building. Eleanor Vance clutched her twin babies close to her chest. The infants had been crying for an hour, and she no longer knew what to do. She had arrived in New York City that morning, on the last bus from Harmony Creek, with barely $30 in her pocket, and only the clothes on her back. I just need a moment for them to calm down, she murmured, trying to rock the babies. Please! It's not my problem. Leave or I'll call the police. The first drops of rain began to fall. Eleanor looked up and felt her world ending. The babies were still crying, and she had nowhere to go. She knew no one in this enormous city. Is there a problem here? The voice came from the building's entrance. A man in an impeccable suit descended the stairs with his phone in hand. He was in his 40s, with slicked back dark hair and a stern expression that was intimidating. Mr. Thorne, this woman won't leave, the guard explained. I already told her she can't be here with the children. Julian Thorne approached a little closer and observed Eleanor. She looked up, and for a second their gazes met. Her eyes were red from crying so much, but there was something else, a determination that refused to give up. How long have you been here? He asked her directly. I arrived this morning. I just need... Eleanor tried to explain, but one of the twins began to cry louder. I have nowhere to go. The rain started to fall harder. Julian looked up at the gray sky, and then back at the woman with the babies. There was something about that scene that disturbed him. He didn't know why, but he couldn't just get into his car and drive away. Roberts, leave her alone, he told the guard. I'll handle it. Sir, you heard me. The guard walked away, grumbling. Julian stood facing Eleanor, not quite knowing what to say. She looked at him with distrust, as if expecting him to also tell her to leave. What's your name? Eleanor Smith. And them? Leo and Sam. They're 8 months old. The babies had stopped crying for a moment, as if sensing the situation had changed. Julian observed them. They looked very much alike, with dark hair and big eyes like their mother's. Are you running from someone? Eleanor hesitated before responding. From my ex. He got violent and I had to leave. Do you have family here? No. I thought I could get a job, but... Her voice broke. I didn't know it would be so hard with the children. Julian took out his phone and dialed a number. Beatrice, it's me. I need you to come to the building. Yes, now. Bring the keys to the guest apartment. No. Don't ask. Just come. He hung up and turned to Eleanor. My sister's on her way. She has an apartment where you can stay for a few days, while you decide what to do. Why are you helping me? She asked, unable to hide her suspicion. You don't know me. You're right. I don't know you. But I can't leave you on the street with 2 babies. Eleanor studied him. There was something about that man she didn't quite understand. His expensive clothes, his way of speaking, the way the guard obeyed him without question. Everything indicated he had power and money. But she had also noticed something else. When he looked at the babies, his expression softened a little. And what do you want in return? Nothing, Julian replied curtly. At least for now. A car pulled up in front of the building, and a woman rushed out into the rain. She was younger than Julian, with pulled-back brown hair and glasses. She looked worried. Julian, what's going on? She asked upon reaching them. Beatrice, this is Eleanor. She needs a place to stay with her children. Beatrice looked at Eleanor, and then at her brother with surprise. She had known Julian forever, and had never seen him help a stranger like this. Of course, no problem, she finally said. The apartment is available. Listen, Eleanor interrupted. I don't want charity. If you're going to help me, tell me what you expect in return. There's always something. For now, you just need a roof over your head, Beatrice said with a kind smile. We'll see about the rest later. Julian handed his car keys to his driver. Take her to the Midtown building. We'll follow. As they got into the car, Eleanor turned to look at Julian one last time. He was still standing in the rain with his hands in his pockets, watching her. There was something in his gaze she couldn't decipher. It wasn't pity, nor pure kindness. It was something more complex, as if she reminded him of something he preferred not to remember. When the car pulled away, Julian remained for a moment longer in the rain. Without knowing why, he took out his phone and dialed his assistant. Mark, I need you to investigate someone. Eleanor Smith. I want to know where she worked before, where she studied. Everything you can find. Yes, it's urgent. Something told him this woman hadn't arrived in his life by chance. What do you think Julian will uncover about Eleanor's past? How will this revelation change their relationship? Share your predictions in the comments below. A fateful discovery. I don't understand why you did that. Beatrice closed the apartment door and turned to her brother. Since when do you help strangers on the street? Julian paced the living room, phone in hand, waiting for his assistant's call. He hadn't slept well all night, thinking about the woman with the twins. I don't know. Something felt wrong about leaving her there. Wrong feeling or good feeling. Beatrice knew him too well. Because your face isn't that of someone who did a good deed. The phone rang before Julian could answer. Mark, what did you find? What do you mean, she worked where? No, wait, repeat that to me. Beatrice saw her brother's expression change completely. He turned pale and clutched the phone tighter. In what area exactly? When? All right, send me everything by email. He hung up and stood in the middle of the living room, as if he had seen a ghost. What's wrong, Julian? She worked at St. Jude's Hospital, in intensive care, 3 years ago. Beatrice took a moment to understand why that had upset him so much. When she realized, she felt a chill. Julian, it can't be a coincidence that— Of course it's not a coincidence, he interrupted. No one just appears in your life like that. She wants something from me. You're paranoid. You saw her. She has 2 babies. She's running from— What if it's a lie? What if all this is an act? Beatrice grabbed his arm. Stop. Breathe. You can't think like that about everyone. I can't. Look where she worked, Beatrice. Right where Mom died. Does that seem like a coincidence to you? Silence stretched between the 2 siblings. Beatrice knew that their mother's death had marked Julian in a way he never wanted to admit. He had sued the hospital. He had screamed negligence. He had looked for culprits for years. All right, she finally said. If it bothers you so much, let's investigate. But in the meantime, we're not going to leave her on the street. What do you propose? That she come work with me? At the company, as an administrative assistant. That way you can keep a close eye on her, and I can get to know her better. Julian looked at her, surprised. Are you serious? Completely. If she's really up to something, she'll give herself away. And if not, we give her a real chance to get ahead. 3 days later, Eleanor was sitting at Beatrice's desk, filling out hiring paperwork. The twins slept in their strollers beside the chair. It's temporary, Beatrice explained. 6 months to start. The salary isn't much, but it's enough for you to rent something small. And your brother agrees to this? It was his idea. Eleanor looked up, surprised. Since the day he helped her in the rain, Julian had treated her with a coldness that cut. When they crossed paths in the hallways, he barely greeted her. When she tried to thank him, he changed the subject. I don't like your brother, she said bluntly. Beatrice chuckled. Most people don't like him at first, but he's not bad. Just complicated. Why are you helping me if he can't even stand me? That's a good question. Maybe you should ask him. That afternoon, Eleanor was organizing files when Julian entered the office. He walked to the desk where she was working and stood there, observing her. Do you need something, Mr. Thorne? How long did you work at St. Jude's Hospital? The question took her by surprise. Eleanor stopped writing and looked at him. 2 years. Why? In what area? Intensive care. But I resigned when I got pregnant because the hours were too demanding. Do you remember the patients? Eleanor studied him. There was something odd about those questions. Something personal. Some, yes. Why are you asking me that? Julian didn't respond immediately. He stood there as if debating with himself whether to continue or not. My mother died in that hospital 3 years ago. Eleanor felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Suddenly everything made sense. The coldness, the glances, the way he treated her as if she were guilty of something. What was her name? Helena Thorne. The name sounded familiar, but Eleanor had attended hundreds of patients in those 2 years. I don't remember the specific name, but... She paused. Is that why you helped me? You think I had something to do with what happened? I don't think anything. I just want to know the truth. The truth is I was just a nurse. I didn't make medical decisions. If your mother died, it wasn't my fault. Julian observed her for a long moment. There was something in the way she looked at him, without looking away, without apologizing for something she hadn't done. That disarmed him a little. I'm going to find out, he finally said. Do it. But in the meantime, treat me as what I am, an employee who needs this job to support her children. After Julian left, Eleanor sat there, trembling a little. She knew this conversation would change everything between them, but she also knew she had nothing to hide. What will Julian discover in his mother's medical records? How will this truth impact his relationship with Eleanor and his perception of his past? Share your predictions below. A mother's sacrifice. That night, while the twins slept, Eleanor's phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she was afraid to answer. Eleanor, it's Daniel. We need to talk. I got Mom's file. Beatrice entered Julian's office with a thick folder in her hands. I had to call 3 different contacts, but here's everything. Julian looked up from his computer. He had spent a week since his conversation with Eleanor and hadn't been able to concentrate on anything else. He saw her every day working in silence, efficient and serious, not speaking to him more than necessary. What does it say? Read it yourself, but I'll tell you now, you're not going to like it. Beatrice placed the folder on the desk and sat across from her brother. Julian opened the file and began to read. At first, everything seemed normal. The symptoms, the diagnosis, the medications. But when he reached the nursing reports, his expression changed. Patient presents with respiratory complications at 11:45 p.m. Nurse Smith requests immediate presence of on-call doctor. He read aloud. Dr. Jones does not respond to calls. Nurse Smith initiates emergency protocol without medical authorization. He continued reading, and his voice faded. 12:15 a.m. Nurse Smith continues resuscitation maneuvers despite having finished her shift. Dr. Jones arrives at 12:30 a.m. and declares brain death. Nurse Smith refuses to stop procedures until cardiology arrives. Julian closed the file and remained silent for several minutes. Beatrice said nothing, waiting for him to process what he had just read. She tried to save her, he murmured finally. Not only that, she kept trying for 45 minutes after her shift ended. The doctor arrived late and didn't want to do anything else. Why didn't you tell me this before? Why did you need to read it yourself? Why have you spent 3 years hating the wrong hospital? Julian stood up from his chair and walked to the window. From there, he could see the work area where Eleanor was organizing documents with the twins, playing at her feet on a blanket. My God, Beatrice, what have I done? You still have time to fix it. How do I explain to her that for a week I've treated her like a criminal, when in reality she was the only person who actually fought to save Mom? Julian left his office and went to the area where Eleanor worked. She looked up when she saw him approach, with that cautious expression she had adopted since their last conversation. Eleanor, can you come to my office? We need to talk. Did I do something wrong? No, on the contrary. Eleanor left the twins with a colleague and followed Julian. When they entered the office, he pointed to a chair and closed the door. I read my mother's file. Eleanor tensed immediately. And I was wrong about you, completely. Julian sat across from her and showed her the open folder. You were the one who tried to save her, who stayed after your shift, who kept trying when the doctor had already given up. Eleanor looked at the papers without touching them. I just did my job. No, you did more than your job. You did what I would have wanted someone to do for my mother. So you no longer think I'm some kind of criminal. I think you're the bravest person I've ever met, and that I owe you a huge apology. Eleanor remained silent for a moment, processing what she had just heard. Do you know what the saddest thing about all this is? She finally said. That your mother asked me to tell her family something if something happened. Julian felt his breath catch. What? That she loved them, that she was proud of them, and that she didn't want them to remember her sick, but smiling. The tears Julian had been holding back for 3 years finally came. He covered his face with his hands and cried, as he hadn't cried since the funeral. Eleanor didn't know what to do. That powerful man who had intimidated her so much was there, completely vulnerable in front of her. I'm sorry, he murmured. I shouldn't. It's okay. You needed to let it out. After a few minutes, Julian calmed down and looked at her. How can I make this up to you for all this? You don't owe me anything. Just treat me normally, like any other employee. What do you need? For the children? For you? Mr. Thorne! Julian! Call me Julian. Julian, I don't want charity. I want to work. I want to study at night. I want to make it on my own. What do you want to study? Finish my nursing degree. I had to stop halfway through when the twins were born. I can help you with that. Arrange your schedule so you can go to classes. Eleanor looked at him with distrust again. Why would you do that? Because my mother would have wanted me to, and because you deserve it. That afternoon, while Julian was organizing the flexible schedule for Eleanor, his phone rang. It was her, and she sounded agitated. Julian, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but Daniel called again. He wants to see the children. He says he has rights, and he's coming for them. Where are you? In a room I rented in a less than ideal neighborhood. It's horrible, but it's what I can afford. Do you need help? There was a long silence before she replied. Yes, but only legal help. Nothing else. It's okay. We'll talk tomorrow. When he hung up, Julian smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. Eleanor had come back, not because she needed him, but because she needed help. And that difference changed everything. Julian reviewed the legal documents his lawyer had prepared when Patricia entered his office with a box full of old papers. Mr. Thorne, I found this in the archives. They're documents from your father that were never reviewed after his death. My father? What kind of documents? Bank statements, transfers, investments? I thought maybe you'd want to see them. Julian took the box without much interest. It had been years since he had thought of his father as anything but the man who abandoned them. He had left his mother with 2 young children, and they never heard from him again, until a lawyer called to tell them he had died. Leave it there. I'll look at it later. Patricia left, and Julian continued working on Eleanor's case. He had gotten the best family lawyer in the city and was preparing all the documentation that could help her. But something about that box bothered him. At the end of the afternoon, when he could no longer concentrate, he opened it. The first papers were what he expected: bank accounts, investments, properties. But when he reached further down, he found something that chilled him. Monthly transfers. For 15 years. All directed to an account he knew very well: his mother's account. He kept looking and found more. Tuition payments, payments for Beatrice's clinic, payments for medical treatments. All with a handwritten note. For Helena and the children. It can't be, he murmured, reviewing the dates. His phone rang. It was Beatrice. Julian, Can you come to my office? Eleanor is here, and she needs to talk to you. Beatrice, did you know Dad was sending us money? What? What are you talking about? I found documents. Dad never abandoned us financially. Mom received money from him every month until he died. The silence on the other end of the line was long. Beatrice, did you know? I suspected something. Mom always had more money than she earned at the hospital. But when I asked her, she changed the subject. Why didn't she tell us? Maybe because she knew you'd hate him anyway. Julian hung up and sat in his office, surrounded by papers that changed the entire story he had been told about his family. His father had not been the man who abandoned them without a word. He had been a man who left, but who never stopped supporting them. An hour later, he arrived at Beatrice's office. Eleanor was sitting on the sofa with the twins asleep in their strollers. She looked exhausted and worried. "How are you?" he asked her, sitting in front of her, scared. "Daniel's lawyer says he has a solid case, that I don't have economic stability, that I change jobs constantly, that I don't have family support. We can refute all of that." "How?" "It's true. I resigned from my job. I live in a horrible room. I have no one." Julian looked at Beatrice, and then on at Eleanor. "Do you trust me?" "Trust? What do you mean?" "That if you trust me, I can help you win this case, but you have to let me help you for real." Eleanor studied him. "What kind of help?" "Come back to work with me. I'll arrange your schedule so you can study. I'll help you find a better apartment. I'll lend you the money for a good lawyer. I already told you I don't want charity. It's not charity, it's an investment. In you, in your children, in you getting ahead. And what do you gain?" Julian was silent for a moment. He thought about his father, about all those years he had believed a lie, about all the times he had judged without knowing the whole story. "I gained the opportunity to do something right, to not repeat my family's mistakes. I don't understand. My father abandoned us when I was 8, or so I believed my whole life. Today I discovered that he continued to support us until he died, but he never told us. My mother didn't tell us either. We all keep secrets thinking we're protecting others, but in the end, we only hurt more." Eleanor listened to him in silence. "I don't want to be like my father, who helped from a distance without showing his face. Nor do I want to be like my mother, who carried everything alone out of pride. I want to be present. I want you to know exactly what I'm doing and why. And what exactly are you doing? I'm helping a good mother not lose her children because of a man who doesn't deserve them. I'm helping an intelligent woman finish her degree. I'm trying to do the right thing." Eleanor thought for several minutes. The twins stirred in their strollers, starting to wake up. "What if I accept your help and then you decide it was a mistake?" "It won't happen." "How can you be sure?" "Because I've had 2 weeks to regret it, and here I am." Beatrice, who had been listening in silence, approached Eleanor. "My brother isn't perfect, but when he commits to something, he follows through. Always." Eleanor looked at the twins, who were now awake and watching her with their big, curious eyes. "Okay, but with conditions. Tell me, everything you lend me, you write it down. Every dollar. And when I finish my degree and get a good job, I'll pay you back everything. Eleanor, that's my condition. Either this way or nothing." Julian extended his hand. "Deal." When she shook his hand, Julian felt something he hadn't felt in years. The feeling that he was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. What do you think will be the biggest challenge for Julian and Eleanor during the custody battle? How will their newfound partnership fare against Daniel's legal action? Share your predictions below. A solid foundation. On the day of the hearing, Eleanor arrived at the courthouse in a navy blue suit Beatrice had lent her. The twins were dressed in new clothes Julian had insisted on buying, though she had meticulously noted every penny in her debt ledger. "Ready?" "Mr. Peterson, The lawyer Julian had hired asked her. No, but I have no choice. Daniel was already seated on the other side of the courtroom with his lawyer, an older man who looked self-assured. When he saw Eleanor, he smiled in a way that sent shivers down her spine. Everything will be fine, Julian whispered, sitting behind her on the accompanying bench. How can you be so sure? Because the truth is on your side. The judge entered and began the hearing. Daniel's lawyer spoke first. Your Honor, my client is the biological father of the minors, Leo and Sam Miller. For the past few months, the mother has prevented him from exercising his paternal rights, taking the children to another city without his consent. Does the defendant have a fixed address? The judge asked. According to our investigation, she has changed her address 3 times in the last 2 months. She currently lives in a rented room in a dangerous part of the city. Does she have stable employment? She resigned from her last job a month ago. Her economic situation is precarious. Eleanor felt her stomach sink. Everything they said was technically true, though it didn't tell the whole story. Daniel's lawyer continued. My client, on the contrary, has a stable job as a supervisor in a manufacturing plant, his own apartment, and the support of his family. He is prepared to provide stability to the minors. Has the plaintiff contributed financially to the support of the minors? He is willing to do so from now on, Your Honor. The problem has been that the mother has not given him the opportunity. When it was Mr. Peterson's turn, he stood up with a folder full of documents. Your Honor, I would like to present evidence that demonstrates why the minors should remain with their mother. He took out some photographs and showed them to the judge. These are photographs of the injuries Ms. Smith suffered the last time she lived with the plaintiff. As you can see, there is a bruise on her left arm and scrapes on her neck. Those photos are old, Daniel's lawyer protested. They are dated 4 months ago, just before Ms. Smith decided to leave the city. We also have the medical report from the clinic where she was treated. The judge examined the documents. Does the plaintiff have a history of domestic violence? He has not been prosecuted, but we have testimonies from neighbors who confirm episodes of verbal and physical violence. For the next 2 hours, evidence was presented from both sides. Daniel testified that he had changed, that he wanted to be a good father, that he had economic stability. Eleanor spoke of the years she raised the twins alone, of the sleepless nights, of her fears. Your Honor, Mr. Peterson finally said, I would like to call a witness who can attest to Ms. Smith's character as a mother. I call Mr. Julian Thorne. Eleanor turned, surprised. They hadn't known Julian was going to testify. Julian stood up and walked to the stand. Daniel's lawyer looked confused. What is your relationship with the defendant? She is an employee of my company. She also lives in an apartment I manage. Why did you decide to help her? Julian looked at Eleanor before answering. Because I've seen how she takes care of her children. I've seen how she gets up at 5 in the morning to prepare everything before going to work. I've seen how she studies late after putting them to bed. I've seen how she cries when she thinks she can't give them more. His voice grew firmer. Those children don't need a father who shows up when it suits him. They need what they already have, a mother who loves them more than her own life. Do you consider Ms. Smith to be a good mother? I consider her the best mother I've ever known, and I've known many. Are you willing to financially support the family if custody is granted to the mother? It's not necessary. She doesn't need anyone to support her. She only needs them not to take her children away. Daniel's lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is not answering the question. Yes, I am answering, Julian said. Ms. Smith doesn't need my money. She has a job. She's studying for a degree. She has plans to get ahead. All she needs is time to achieve it without anyone taking her children away. When Julian stepped down from the stand, Eleanor had tears in her eyes. Not because he had spoken well of her, but because he had spoken the truth. The judge retired to deliberate for an hour. When he returned, the courtroom was completely silent. After reviewing all the evidence presented, This court determines that the best interest of the minors is to remain with their mother. Provisional custody is granted to Ms. Eleanor Smith, with supervised visits for the father every 15 days. Daniel stood up, furious. "This isn't over. I'm going to appeal." But Eleanor was no longer listening to him. She could only think that her children were staying with her. When they left the courthouse, she turned to Julian. "Thank you for everything you said in there. I only spoke the truth. Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you really believe everything you said about me?" Julian looked her in the eyes. "Every word." For the first time since they had met, Eleanor smiled at him without reservations. "Then maybe I can trust you. What do you think will be the next step for Eleanor and Julian after this victory? Will their relationship deepen into something more than friendship? Share your thoughts below. The heart of a family. 3 months after the trial, Eleanor had moved into a small but decent apartment in the Riverside district. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. Julian had insisted on helping her with the deposit, and she had meticulously noted every dollar in her debt ledger. "Tuesdays and Thursdays you have classes until 8, Julian reminded her as he organized the twins' toys. "I'll pick them up from daycare. You don't have to do that. I can ask the neighbor to." "Eleanor, we've talked about this. I like spending time with them." It was true. For the past few weeks, Julian had started arriving every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 in the evening. At first, it was only so she could go to university, but little by little it had become something more. They had dinner together. He helped bathe the children. He read them stories. "Surely you don't have something better to do?" Eleanor asked him as she prepared dinner. "I don't know. Dates, social engagements, rich people stuff. Do you think I have many dates?" "I don't know. We never talk about your personal life." Julian was sitting on the floor playing with Leo and Sam. The twins were already 1 year old and had started walking. They kept following him around the apartment. "I don't have dates," he said without looking up. "I haven't had a serious relationship in years." "Why not?" "Because I never found anything worthwhile." Eleanor looked at him from the kitchen. There was something in the way he said it that made her feel strange. "And now you have?" Julian looked up and met her gaze directly. "Maybe." They stared at each other for a moment until Sam tripped and started crying. The moment broke, but something had changed between them. That night, after putting the children to bed, they sat on the sofa to review Eleanor's university assignments. "I don't understand this pharmacology problem," she said, pointing to the book. "Why don't you ask Beatrice? She knows medicine." "Because I already owe your family too many favors." "Eleanor," Julian said, "are you serious? Sometimes I feel like I'm taking advantage of your kindness." "Our kindness?" Julian closed the book and looked at her. "Do you think we do all this out of kindness?" "No. We do it because you matter to us, you and the children. Why do we matter to you? We barely know you." Julian was silent for a moment, as if he were deciding how much to say. "Because when I met you, you were in the most difficult situation of your life, and you didn't ask for pity. You asked for work. Because when I thought the worst of you, you didn't defend yourself with shouts, but with actions. Because I've seen how you love your children, and you make me think that maybe I could also be part of something like that." "Part of what?" "A family." The word hung between them. Eleanor felt her heart race. "Julian, we're not a couple." "I know, but we are something. I don't know what, but we are something." Eleanor got up from the sofa and walked to the window. "This is dangerous." "Why?" "Because I'm getting used to it. The children are getting used to it. And when people like you get tired of playing family, people like me who are rich, powerful, used to changing whims." Julian got up and approached her. "Do you really think this is a whim for me? I don't know. I don't know anything about you, really. I don't know what you want from life, what makes you happy, what scares you. Do you want to know?" "Yes, I want a family. It makes me happy to see Sam try to walk alone. It scares me that one day you'll decide you don't need me anymore and disappear again." Eleanor looked at him, surprised. You think I'm going to leave? I don't know. You already did once. That time was different. I thought you wanted to control me. And what do you think now? Eleanor took her time to answer. Now I think maybe you can be part of this, but with rules. What kind of rules? No promises you can't keep. No playing the hero when it suits you. If you're going to be here, you're here for real. For everything. For the sleepless nights. For the tantrums. For when the children get sick. And for when you have bad days. Also, and if we fight, we talk. We don't yell. We don't walk out slamming doors. We talk. Julian extended his hand. Deal. When she shook it, Eleanor felt something settle into place. She didn't know if it was love, but it was something solid. Something she could trust. That night, after Julian left, Eleanor stayed awake thinking. The twins slept in their room. The house was silent, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of the future. The next day, Julian arrived as always at 6 in the evening, but this time he brought a small suitcase. What's that? Clothes to stay on weekends, if that's okay with you. Eleanor smiled. Perfect. Sam and Leo ran towards him, shouting, Julian! Julian! And for the first time, the word family didn't scare either of them. 2 years later, Eleanor walked down the hospital hallway in her new uniform as a registered nurse. She had gotten a job at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in the pediatric area. The salary was good, the benefits too. And for the first time in her life, she felt completely independent. Mommy! Sam ran towards her when she came out of her first day of work. Careful! Julian shouted, running behind him with Leo in his arms. I told you to wait! The twins were already 3.5 years old. Sam was the adventurer, always running ahead. Leo was more cautious, observing everything before acting. Both adored Julian, though they still called him Uncle Julian most of the time. How was your first day? Julian asked her when he reached her. Good. Tired, but good. Eleanor took Leo in her arms. What did you two do? We went to the park, ate ice cream, and Sam fell off the swing, Julian replied. It didn't hurt, Sam protested, showing a band-aid on his knee. Of course not, you're very brave, Eleanor told him, bending down to kiss the band-aid. On the way home, Julian drove while the children played in the back seat. Eleanor watched him out of the corner of her eye. In these 2 years, he had changed a lot. He was still the same serious man at work, but at home, he was different, more relaxed, more present. What are you thinking about? He asked her. That 2 years ago, I never would have imagined this life. Do you like it? I love it, but sometimes it scares me. Why? Because it's too perfect, and perfect things break. Julian stopped the car at a red light and looked at her. Do you think we're perfect? We're not perfect, but we're solid. And that scares you? A little. The light changed to green, and they continued driving. That night, after putting the children to bed, they sat on the sofa as always. Eleanor, I want to talk to you about something, Julian said suddenly. Did something happen? No, nothing bad. It's just that I've been thinking about us. What about us? About what we are, what we're not. Eleanor felt her stomach clench. Do you want things to change? No, yes, I don't know. Julian ran his hands through his hair. It's complicated. Explain. We live together on weekends. We have dinner together every night. We raise the children together. We argue about who washes the dishes. But we never talk about what we really are. We're a family, aren't we? But what kind of family? Because the children are already asking me why I don't sleep in the same room as you, and I don't know what to tell them. Eleanor fell silent. It was true that the situation had become strange. Julian had his own room in the apartment, but technically they were still just friends. Friends. Who raised children together and took care of each other. What do you want us to tell them? I don't know. The truth? Julian looked her directly in the eyes. That I love you. That I love the children. That I want us to be a real family. Eleanor felt her breath catch. They had avoided that conversation for 2 years. Julian, you don't have to answer anything now. I just wanted you to know. How long have you known? For a long time. Maybe since the day of the trial, when I saw you fight for your children. Or maybe before. I don't know. Why haven't you said anything? Because I didn't want to pressure you. Because I knew you needed time to trust. Because I wanted things to happen naturally. Eleanor got up from the sofa and walked to the window. Outside, it was raining softly. And what if it doesn't work? What if we try to be a couple and everything gets ruined? And what if it does? I'm scared, Julian. Me too. The children already love you like a daddy. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. You can't promise me that. You're right, I can't. But I can promise you that I'm going to try every day. That I'm not going to leave at the first fight. That we're going to work on this like we've worked on everything else. Eleanor turned to him. What are you asking for exactly? For you to give me a chance. For us to see what happens if we stop being afraid. Eleanor thought for a long time. She thought about everything they had built together. About the stability the children had found. About the way Julian looked at her when he thought she wasn't looking. Okay, she finally said. But slowly. And if something doesn't work, we talk before it becomes a problem. Julian got up and walked towards her. Can I hug you? Of course. When he hugged her, Eleanor felt something she had been holding back for years finally relax. It wasn't the end of fear, but perhaps it was the beginning of something stronger than fear. You know what's the strangest thing about all this? He whispered in her ear. What? That I feel like we've been a couple for a long time. Julian chuckled softly. Maybe because we already were, we just didn't want to admit it. 6 months later, Eleanor woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. It was Saturday morning, and golden sunlight streamed through the window. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to Julian and the twins' voices. No, Sam. Pancakes are flipped like this, Julian said patiently. Look, let me show you. I want to too, Leo shouted. Of course, but we wait our turn. Leo, you can beat the eggs. Eleanor smiled and got up. Upon reaching the kitchen, she found a beautiful mess. Flour on the floor, the children's faces stained with dough, and Julian trying to cook while supervising 2 4-year-old helpers. Good morning, she said, giving Julian a quick kiss on the cheek. Mommy, we're making pancakes. Sam ran towards her with hands full of dough. I see. And who's cleaning this mess? We are, Julian replied. After breakfast? Does we include the gentlemen? Of course. You know that in this house we all clean up what we mess up. Eleanor poured herself coffee and sat down to watch them. In recent months, her life had changed in ways she never expected. Not because Julian had officially moved into her apartment, because that had already happened some time ago, but because they had stopped pretending they were just friends. It hadn't been dramatic. There had been no grand declarations or movie moments. They simply stopped sleeping in separate rooms one day. Another day, they started holding hands when they walked. Then came the good morning and good night kisses. The children had adapted without problems. For them, Julian had always been part of the family. Now he was just officially so. Daddy Julian, can we go to the park after we clean? Leo asked. Eleanor felt her heart clench. The children had started calling him Daddy Julian a few weeks ago. The first time it happened, Julian had looked at her, asking with his eyes if it was okay. She had only smiled. Of course, but only if you help with the cleaning, Julian replied. Yes! After breakfast, while the children played in the living room, Eleanor and Julian cleaned the kitchen together. You know what I like most about this? Eleanor said to him while drying dishes. What? That it feels normal, like it's always been this way. Is normal boring? No. Normal is safe. It's knowing that when I come home, you'll be here. It's being able to plan the future without fear. Julian stopped washing dishes and looked at her. You plan the future with me? Every day, you don't? For years. That afternoon, they went to the park as they had promised. The twins ran towards the playground while they sat on a bench watching them. Daniel called again, Eleanor suddenly said. What did he want now? To see the children. He says he's changed, that he wants to be part of their lives. What did you tell him? That he can come next Saturday, for an hour, in the park, with me present. Julian looked at her, surprised. Are you sure? The children have a right to know their biological father, and I have the right for it to be on my terms. Do you want me to be there? No, I'm handling this alone, but I want you to know it's going to happen. Are you afraid he'll try to take them again? No, not anymore. Now the children have a stable life, a family that loves them. If Daniel really wants to be part of their lives, he'll have to adapt to what we've already built. Julian took her hand. You know you don't have to face everything alone, right? I know. But I also know I can. And that's the difference. What difference? Between the woman I was when I met you and the woman I am now. Before I needed someone to save me. Now I know I can save myself. But I choose to share my life with you. And is that better? It's much better. Because it means I'm here because I want to, not because I need to. Sam and Leo ran towards them, sweaty and happy. Can we go for ice cream? Sam asked. Please, added Leo, with his most convincing eyes. Eleanor looked at Julian. What does Daddy think? Daddy thinks ice cream is fine, but only if you promise to eat your vegetables for dinner. We promise. As they walked towards the ice cream shop, all four holding hands, Eleanor realized something. They had built a family that was nothing like what she had imagined as a child. There was no wedding ring. They hadn't signed papers. They didn't have the same last name. But they had something more important. They had chosen to be together every day, and they would continue to choose each other tomorrow and the day after, and every day that came. Because that was true love, not a promise forever, but a decision made every day. Did you like the story of Eleanor and Julian? This beautiful novel teaches us that true love doesn't always come as we expect, but is built day by day with respect, trust, and conscious decisions. The way these two characters overcame their fears and prejudices to form a family based on choice and not on need is truly inspiring. If this story touched your heart as much as it did ours, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone you think needs to hear that it's always possible to start over. We'd love to get to know our beautiful community that accompanies us in these stories full of emotions. If you enjoyed this complete story and want to continue living more romantic adventures like this, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to not miss any new stories. And now we want to know, from which country are you watching us? Write your country in the comments below and tell us what you liked most about the story of Eleanor, Julian, and the twins. We love reading your messages and knowing that our stories reach hearts all over the world.